a lot of people listening, a lot of guys listening do have a more aesthetic focused goal. Like if you were to ask them like, what is it that you want more than anything else out of your fitness? They want to change the way they look. And that usually requires putting on some muscle.
I don't think the problem is like needing to put on more and more and more muscle for the general dude. I wouldn't say that that's like the general solution to getting the look that most people need.
That's where I think that, because MDV, when you were talking about like the example of like the 4% body fat trying to get on stage, like extreme bodybuilding example, I think, and maybe you guys think differently, that a lot of people listening, a lot of guys listening do have a more aesthetic focused goal. Like if you were to ask them like, what is it that you want more than anything else out of your fitness? They want to change the way they look. And that usually requires putting on some muscle. And like I said, that's very hard. I think that a lot of people would benefit from having something that's very structured, having something with progressive overload, having actual rest days where you're not going out and, you know, just doing like garbage volume and not letting your body actually recover from the adaptation. Or also probably not working hard enough when they actually go into the gym. And I know that was throwing a lot of stuff out there, but I do think that most people not necessarily want to get stage ready just to break from this plateau because they've been doing, whether it's CrossFit or jumping around different programs for longer than that 18 to 24-month period, would really benefit now from something that's a little bit more specific. And I know that nutrition is just a completely different side that a lot of people could just benefit just from cleaning that up. But purely from a training standpoint, I think that a lot of men specifically listening, once they like peel back the layers, like what's your actual goal? What do you actually want? Would benefit from, I mean, again, you know, completely biased here, but something like Flex, something with that approach, as long as they're doing just enough to maintain conditioning for like general health and longevity, but like you're not getting the benefit from the Metcon. You just aren't for your goals.
All right. I think that this is, you're biased, but
for sure.
I somewhat agree with you. I would say that most people though, that I don't think the problem is like needing to put on more and more and more muscle for the general dude. I wouldn't say that that's like the general solution to getting the look that most people need. I think that there's some like nuance there. I think that you got to lose fat. I think that you have to take the fat that's covering up the layers of muscle that you have and expose it. And you can do that in a number of different ways. Yes, gaining muscle, you know, obviously you're going to look better if that's something you want to do. But like, I think like a lot of guys want to lose 10 or 15 pounds too, and show what they have underneath that 10 or 15 pounds. You can see some big changes there, man. I think that that's also a valid route to take. Just a little bit of a different approach, highly specific on what you're putting into your body nutrition wise, and maybe a little bit more wiggle room with the type of training that you're doing. Flex is fantastic. I mean, I love the Flex programming. I think you do a really good job of giving people really great workouts, good volume. The workouts are really fucking tough too. I think it's just a different point of view on that point though.
I've enjoyed lately this like AMRAP style. Lately I've been doing more like these strength focused AMRAPs, and those have been super fun for me in particular. Only because it allows me to kind of elicit this like chasing the clock, trying to get max reps, but not so much I'm like laying in a puddle of sweat afterwards. So I've really enjoyed strength focused AMRAPs, and I feel like they've been really helping me. Speaking of which, I have a question. So this morning I'm training hard, always. And
RP7 Khalipa.
So here's what we said. My RP7 is the typical guy's RP10. That's been the goal. That's always the goal. My goal is always to be the most fit. Anyways.
I mean, sticking to that point, I think your RP like 3 is most people's RP10, but that's besides the point. I think
it doesn't change the fact I can still hit RP10.
Of RP is, you know, if it's an RP10, it's an RP10. It should be relative to your fitness level.
Dude, I hit an RP10 a couple of days ago with these devil's presses that we were racing the clock. Dude, I hit RP10 multiple times a week. Anyways, but back to what I was saying. I wrote this down. Do some people, is sweat an indicator of performance? And so the reason why I brought this up is this morning, I'm working out with someone and we're 36 minutes into a workout and I'm not really sweating much. It's cold. And he's like drenched. And he's like, dude, you're just so fit that you don't sweat. And I was like, nah, dude, I don't think that has anything to do with that. I just think that some people sweat more than others. What has your guys' experience been with that? Is it an indicator of your fitness, or is it just an indicator that some people sweat more than others? Because I've been around people that are hella fit that sweat a ton.
I don't think it's an indication of anything. Some people just sweat a lot, some people don't.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
I sweat so much.
Yeah, I'm a sweater.
An ungodly amount of sweat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's a correlation there, but obviously there's a correlation of if you're not in great shape, workouts are just going to hit different. You have people that I remember, people that start sweating on the warm up. You make them hold, do some squat therapy against the wall and they're sweating buckets. Yeah. Actually, that's a bad example. Squat therapy is incredibly hard. I'll sweat.
Bro,
squat therapy against the wall.
But as he's like sweating like crazy, he's looking at me I'm like, all right. But you're right. It's not I don't think it's an indicator of how fit you are. It's just some people sweat more than others. And that's what I gathered. But I'm sure there's some data out there we can go look up. But that was just my hot take was that.
Now, to speak to quickly, like talk the subject of like RPE 7 versus 10. And like, I think that's a big part of the discussion too, with respect to progress versus maintenance. Like if you're in maintenance mode, you can hang out RPE 7, 8 on the regular and pretty much maintain what you got in terms of strength, conditioning, you name it, muscle. But if you want to continue to see progress, you have to find opportunities to push the intensity, the effort on a regular basis to ensure that you're continuing to see progress. So that's a big part of the conversation, irrespective of the goal, whether it's like, when you asked me the question earlier, I'm thinking of it in terms of like the paradigm of CrossFit, like increasing work capacity, just in general, right? Like getting stronger, improving your conditioning, stuff that you can measure, objective metrics. So I'm kind of thinking of it in those terms, but regardless of how we're talking about the outcome and what the goal is, I still think that's maybe the biggest part of the equation isn't going to be the programming and how you change that, but it's going to be the continued effort that you put into your program if you want to continue to see progress. Because it's hard, like you guys know this. You train long enough and you just start to like lose the will to go to RPE 10 in your training. Like you only have so much of that in the reserve, like over the course of your lifetime. And like, so I think you just reach a point psychologically where you're like, I'm just going to hover here at 7, 8 and be fine with it. And I'm just going to maintain what I got. I think if you want to continue to see progress anywhere, you have to dig in and find opportunities to just put in more effort into your training, which is hard. It's easier said than done.
This is an interesting conversation because I think some of this also comes down to just like being like, and I don't want to get too woo woo here with 4 dudes on a podcast, but like getting like being
no,
okay.
I will not take my shirt off, MDV. No.
Like being okay with like who you are and understanding like, I'm cool with like looking this way. I'm cool with how I feel. I'm making good choices. And like, there's always this like constant, like, I got to get better. I got to be leaner. I got to be more muscular. I got to like do more. I got to get a faster time. That's cool. I'm not saying don't train hard. I love training hard, man. I love getting after it. I love working out. It's been one of the greatest gifts to me of my life is being able to train with friends and train hard and even train by myself. And you get this like awesome introspection. But at some point too, like it's okay to like work out just to work out, to feel the workout. It's okay. Not everything has to be like, I have to work out to get to this goal. Like you get so wrapped around the axle with some of that stuff that like it starts to become stressful. You start to look at your workout and like you start to get too stressed about the result. Did I get a great workout today because I didn't sweat as much, or like I didn't hit this weight, or I didn't hit this amount of reps? And I think that that's one of the things that like I love what CrossFit has done for so many people. But one of the things that I think it has made a little bit strange in the realm of fitness is that like it's so data driven and result driven based on scores. that I think sometimes we forget that like you can work out just to feel good. And it might not be the most optimal workout. You might not lift the most weight that day. You might not get the best sweat in. But like if you felt good about what you did that day, that's like greater than anything else that you could ever, at least in my opinion, greater than any result that you could get writing down on paper or putting a score down. And I've just come to embrace a little bit more of that, which is like loving working out, loving what it does for my body, and not necessarily worrying so much about like, am I 7% body fat right now, 10% body fat, 12% body fat, whatever. Like, am I happy with how I look and how I feel? Yes. Did I get a good workout in today? Cool. Check the box. Let's move on. Go enjoy some other aspects of your life. I'm not saying don't take your fitness seriously. Take it seriously. Get it done for sure. Be consistent with it. But we get so wrapped around the axle of like, does everything need to be driven by like a very specific end state goal versus just utilizing your body, getting out there and feeling good?
Well, I think what you're alluding to though is like, that's you, right? I think that's you and that's probably me.
I'm offering a different perspective for sure. Then
I agree with you.
I have to be doing this at this weight, at this RPE, at this time, to get to this state.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people that haven't had the training age and the amount of years, they like that idea of having things that they're chasing down, right? Like the feeling is, it's just a different vantage point, right? Where they're goal setting based on like, hey, it's really important for me to get to this because they haven't been there before, right? And so then that is where it becomes really important. But if you've been there for 20 years, like I've been training at least 20 years, it's just different for you and me than maybe someone who's like newer, taking fitness to the next level. And that's where the goal setting, that's where those things start to really come into play, in my opinion. And then eventually I think their goal should be to get to the point where you're talking about, right? Eventually, long term, they should be able to get to a point where they've achieved the things they want to achieve through fitness. They've developed the consistency, and now they can look at it through a different lens. You know what I'm saying? But it takes, I think, training age to get to that point, if I'm describing that right.
Yeah, it's maintenance. That's maintenance mode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
But there's nothing wrong with maintenance.
No,
there's nothing wrong with it.
Not at all.
There's nothing wrong with that. Not everything needs to be training for performance. I love the workouts that we put out through Train Hard. I think they're a fucking fantastic solution to get guys who might not be super happy with how they look or how they feel, or even if you are and you want to get to that next level. There's different ways that you can approach what we do at Train Hard. I think we put out fucking fantastic programming, by the way. But I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't think there's just like a value judgment of like, oh, you have to be training for constant progress versus training for consistency and maintenance. I think that putting a value judgment on either one of those is kind of dangerous. Both of those things can be very, very effective. Both of those things can be fulfilling for people. And both of those things can ultimately help you get to a state in which you're happy with.